2018 NFL quarterback class was very interesting. You had a couple of guys who have become superstars, some bust, and some that are right there in the middle. In today's video, I want to talk about the top 6 quarterbacks who were drafted in 2018, go through who they are, what their careers have done, and what they're up to 5 years later. There were obviously some other quarterbacks from that class who were either drafted or undrafted, and I'll more than likely touch on them in a later video. But for now, we're going to focus on the 6 guys who were supposed to be franchise players or got that chance. Let's go ahead and get started. The first quarterback we need to talk about is Baker Mayfield. A lot of you guys know his story, but in case you don't, he decided to go to Texas Tech coming out of high school and was famously a walk-on there. He did very well in his lone season there and decided to transfer up to Oklahoma, where he won the Heisman Trophy and was a 2-time first-team All-American. Because of that, the Cleveland Browns decided to draft him with the number 1 overall pick, and his career has been really up and down, with it being a lot more down in the last few seasons. His best year in terms of touchdowns was his rookie year, as he finished with 27. His best year in terms of yards was his second year, where he threw for 3,827 yards. Ever since then, it started to go downhill a little bit. 2020 was solid, but 2021 was horrible, and most recently, he played for the Panthers and the Rams, and it seems like he is on his way out. He has shown flash, but has not been able to put it all together continuously. The next guy we need to talk about is Sam Darnold, who was taken with the 3rd overall pick in the 2018 NFL Draft by the New York Jets. Coming out of California, Darnold was both a football and basketball phenom, and eventually decided to commit to USC. He ended up sitting behind both Cody Kessler and Max Brown before he would take over in 2016, throwing for 3,086 yards with 31 touchdowns. In 2017, he'd come back and have another tremendous year. He threw for over 4,000 yards with 26 scores and 13 interceptions, and most notably, he beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Because of that, he was selected with the 3rd overall pick by the Jets, and he became the NFL's youngest opening day starting quarterback since the AFL-NFL merger. His career, though, has been largely disappointing. 2019 would be his best season, as he threw for 3,000 yards and 19 touchdowns, but he has always struggled with interceptions, has been extremely inconsistent, and just like Mayfield, he has ended up in Carolina, where he is more than likely going to be replaced, and will probably be a journeyman backup. Unfortunately, Darnold has just never been able to put it all together, and I also think he got screwed over by being on the Jets. Up next, we need to talk about Josh Allen from the 2018 draft. Allen grew up near Fresno, California. Despite having great physical traits, he got no Division I interest, and not a single FBS school offered him a scholarship. Because of that, he had to go to Reed College, and after doing well there, he would transfer up to Wyoming. In 2016, he'd take over as a starter, throwing for 3,200 yards and 28 touchdowns. He had all the potential in the world. His 2017 season was largely disappointing. He ended up finishing with 1,800 yards with 16 touchdowns and 6 picks. Based on stats, there was no reason why this guy should have even been in the NFL conversation, but scouts saw something we didn't. Many believed that he was going to be a bust, and he was eventually taken with the 7th overall pick by the Buffalo Bills. Allen would throw for 2,000 yards and 10 touchdowns in his rookie year before starting every game in 2019. 2020 would be his breakout season, as he threw for 4,500 yards and 37 touchdowns. In 2021, he followed up with another 4,500 yards and 36 scores, and then this past season started to gain traction as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and once again had similar numbers to the last 2 years. So far, he's thrown for 18,000 yards and 138 touchdowns in his career, is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, and he has definitely not been a bust. Up next, we're going to talk about the chosen Rosen. Coming out of Torrance, California, Rosen was the number 1 player in his age group and was a 5-star quarterback. Every school in the country wanted him, and after going to St. John Bosco, he decided to stay close to home and go to UCLA. As a true freshman, Rosen would throw for 3,600 yards with 23 touchdowns, showing that all the hype about him was worth it. Unfortunately, in 2016, he'd only get a chance to play in 6 games, but 2017 was supposed to be a huge year for him. He ended up living up to his name. He threw for 3,700 yards with 26 touchdowns. Because of all of Rosen's potential, the Cardinals decided to take him with the 10th overall pick, and he famously referred 9 players taken before him as 9 mistakes. Unfortunately, many franchises made a mistake bringing him on the roster. He started 13 of 14 games in 2018, throwing for 2,200 yards with 11 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. While the Cardinals were a mess, it was clear that Rosen was not ready to be a starter. In 2019, he'd get a chance to play 3 games for the Dolphins, and since then, he has not started. He's been with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 49ers, the Falcons, the Browns, and the Vikings. Outside of his rookie year, he has barely seen the field, going down as one of the biggest quarterback busts of all time. Up next, we need to talk about Lamar Jackson. Growing up in Florida, Jackson had it tough. His father died when he was only 8 years old, and he would grow up playing football and became good friends with Marquise Hollywood Brown. Eventually, he'd go to Boynton Beach Community High School in Florida, became one of the top dual-threat quarterbacks in the country, throwing for 31 touchdowns and running for 22 more. Schools from all around the country wanted Lamar, as Louisville, Florida, Auburn, and Clemson all pursued him very hard. Eventually chose the Cardinals over the Gators, Nebraska, and Mississippi State. Looking back, part of this is because Bobby Petrino promised his mom that he'd play quarterback and nothing else. This would end up being a terrific decision, as Lamar would play a little bit in 2015 before taking over in 2016. He threw for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns, while running for 1,500 more yards and 21 scores on the ground. In 2016, he won the Heisman Trophy, was a unanimous All-American, and had the most single-season rushing yards by a quarterback ever. It was going to be very difficult to outdo his 2016 season in 2017, but he still did pretty dang good. He threw for 3,600 yards with 27 touchdowns, and ran for 1,600 yards with 18 touchdowns. All in all, Lamar would throw for nearly 10,000 yards, and combined for 109 scores, roughly 2 years of starting. Despite that, NFL scouts were split on how he would do in the NFL, and that is why he fell near the bottom of the first round, and was eventually taken by the Baltimore Ravens. In 2018, he'd play a little bit before he'd take over in 2019. He'd pass for 3,000 yards with 36 touchdowns, and also ran for 1,200 yards and 7 scores there. He led the Ravens to the playoffs and was showing that he was legitimate. In 2020, he'd also have a solid season, and over the last 2 years, he has dealt with a couple of injuries. And overall, Lamar has been really good, but some wonder if he can ever win that big one, and if he can ever repeat his NFL MVP in 2019. Either way, Lamar was a great pickup for the bottom of the first round, and is arguably the most iconic quarterback from the 2018 class. The final guy we need to talk about was third-round pick Mason Rudolph. At one point during his Oklahoma State career, Rudolph was actually a projected top 10 pick. Fortunately, he never got taken there. Out of Rock Hill, South Carolina, Rudolph had a terrific high school career. He threw for 10,986 yards with 132 touchdowns. He was a 4-star recruit and committed to play at Oklahoma State. Going into 2014, he was behind both J.W. Walsh and Dax Garman, but showed potential. In 2015, he'd take over as the full-time starter, throwing for 3,700 yards with 21 touchdowns. In 2016, he increased that to 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns, and then in 2017, he would do even better with 4,500 yards, 35 passing touchdowns, and 10 rushing touchdowns. Because of that, Rudolph was a second-team All-American in 2017, and honestly, looking at his stat, could have actually been a little bit better. Rudolph did not end up getting selected in the top 10 like some thought a year earlier, but would get a chance to be a franchise guy. In 2019, when Big Ben would get hurt, Rudolph would actually start 8 games. In that time, he went 5-3 with 1,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. The most famous play associated with Rudolph, though, was definitely the Browns altercation, and since then, Rudolph has gone back to being a backup. He started 2 games in 2020 and 2021, and most recently did not play in 2022. He'll be a journeyman backup, and for where he was drafted, he's done pretty well for himself, and he at least got a chance. So yeah, that was the 2018 NFL quarterback class. We talked about the top 6 guys, how their careers played out, and where they are 5 years later. I hope you guys enjoyed, and now check out my video about who is the best receiver for the 2023 draft class. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.